Welcome to Bee's Table Talk, the new St. Paul Area Chamber of Commerce podcast. I'm your host, Bee Kyle, President and CEO. We are hosted by Ian Levitt and their amazing Studio Americana here in Minneapolis. We're excited to bring this programming to you. Throughout the year, we meet fascinating, accomplished people, always willing to talk with us, but not necessarily available to fit into our event schedule. So this podcast is our attempt to capture these conversations and share them with our membership and the broader employer community, and through a medium that fits our increasingly mobile lifestyles. Today, I am delighted to be sitting across the table from my friend, Chris Wright from the Minnesota United. He is the president of the organization. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, good morning, Bee.
Delighted to have you here. The whole purpose of today really is to chat about you, where you came from. How is it that you wound up in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota? So if you wouldn't mind, first of all, congratulations on your position at the Minnesota United. The team is lucky to have you. How is it that you moved from 13 years at the Timberwolves and the Lynx to a soccer team?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey that I've been on, and really my journey starts all the way back when I was a kid, and I was born in a little fishing village called Filey, East Yorkshire, England. Everybody in our family went to sea, and my grandfather used to take me to some rocks overlooking the North Sea every Sunday after we'd been to church and Sunday school and everything else, and he used to tell me why I should not go to sea, and I should find a way to get out of Filey. And soccer became it. And, fortunately, I was given some level of talent in the game, started to play the game, was picked up by a professional team over there. So I got out of Filey through soccer. So my roots were in that game. And, I could talk an awful lot about my 26-year career at the Minnesota Timberwolves. I always thought that I would retire there, but when Glenn Taylor became part of the ownership group and really began to understand the opportunity that the MLS is, and the building of a new stadium, the building of a brand, and building of a fan following, supporters groups, etc., but the building of a business that makes sense of the $350 million investment that this group of owners has made in the team. They felt that they wanted somebody a little bit more seasoned to lead the development of the club. And so I was asked to consider that, and along with Bill McGuire, obviously, and Glenn Taylor and Bob Pollard and people like that, eventually I decided that, hey, at this stage of my career, to be able to go back to the game where it all began, my major passion in terms of sports, and to be able to do it in sports and to be able to do it in this market, where I had a ton of experience, and it didn't mean that I would have to uproot my family to go and do this in the sport that I love. It was all happening here. It was truly remarkable. And so the major shift in my thinking really came after a number of conversations with the ownership group, seeing the opportunity, and then really understanding that I could go back into the game that I love and maybe make an impact.
So how long have you been in Minnesota?
I came here in 1986.
Can you tell us a little bit about transitioning into a local? And you brought your family here. They've settled, and obviously your kids grew up here as a result, right?
Yeah, all of my kids. So I've got 3 kids. We came to Minnesota from Pittsburgh. So I was the general manager of the Pittsburgh Spirit in the MISL, and I worked for a gentleman by the name of Edward J. DeBartolo back in the day, who owned the San Francisco 49ers, Pittsburgh Penguins. He ran the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. He was a remarkable man because he was one of the very, very first sports owners who really saw synergistically how you could have franchises from different sports actually work together, take a building where you could amortize all of your fixed costs of all of the things that you needed to do inside of a major building and arena with different franchises who had X number of home games. So we had 17 home games in the MISL back in the day, and yet there were 41 Penguins games, Pittsburgh Penguins games. And I learned so much from him. He gave me opportunities that, I don't believe that I would be where I am today if it wasn't for him. But he asked me to close down the franchise. So that was a different sort of an experience, and I actually closed it down for him, sold off all of the players. And while I was doing that, Joe Robbie, who was the owner then of the Minnesota Strikers. He offered me the position here with the Minnesota Strikers to come to Minnesota. So that's what brought me to Minnesota in the end. So I stayed in the sport, and while I was here, I got to know Rudy Perpich very well, the governor of the state of Minnesota back in the day. He wanted to bring the World Cup here in 1994, and he had this vision of this sod farm up in Blaine, which is now the National Sports Center, and with a gentleman by the name of Paul Erickson, who was the head of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. We went to the state legislature. We got $14.7 million. We built the National Sports Center. We didn't get the World Cup here in 1994. We bid for it, but we didn't get it. So that was when I got to know the community, and I got to know all of the players in the community as not necessarily just through the Minnesota Strikers, but politically with Rudy, and really understanding how St. Paul works, and really then getting into a lot of companies back then who we were trying to convince that this sport of soccer was coming. It was going to play a big role, and the 1994 World Cup was going to be huge. And unfortunately, we failed to bring it to Minnesota. But at the same time, obviously, the 1994 World Cup had a major impact on the sport in this country. And then meanwhile, the Minnesota Timberwolves expanded to this marketplace. A guy called Tim Leiweke was in charge of their sales and marketing. He offered me the opportunity to go to work for the Timberwolves, and that's where my journey with the Minnesota Timberwolves started.
Thank you for the National Sports Center. My son was a soccer player, and we spent a lot of summer afternoons up there, and it continues to be extraordinary as an anchor for the soccer community, wouldn't you say, today?
Yeah, and it's fascinating because, now I'm back involved with the National Sports Center again, and, Todd Johnson and Neil Ladd, the people who run that facility, and the way that it's grown, and it's now not just soccer anymore. It's sort of sheets of ice. There's a basketball facility. They have a golf course up there.
Don't they have a bike racing?
Yeah, and they have a velodrome. We actually built the velodrome. The velodrome actually was built after the design for the Barcelona Olympics and the cycling event there, so that the United States cycling team would come there and train to get ready for the Barcelona Olympics. So there's stories within stories of all of the facilities that we developed up there. But it's with a great sense of pride, I think, that I now go back to the National Sports Center very, very regularly, because we've just signed it could keep us up there actually for anywhere between 30 and 35 years as our training facility for Minnesota United. And we have a marketing agreement. We're working with them with USA Cup right now. And so there are so many intersections in a career that started in 1986 in Minnesota with everything that we did back in the day to where I am today, sort of intersecting again with, great facilities, great people that I've been around for a long time.
So given the tenure you've had, not only specifically in Minnesota, but your career overall, what I have observed about you is your extraordinary character, and you and I have had some great conversations about how to think about life and how to live it well and according to the values that you hold. Can you tell us a little bit about your approach to leadership with the team, for example?
Yeah, it's obviously it evolves, over a period of time, and there's plenty of theories that you lean into. I'm not sure that I'm a person who takes one model and then says, that's the model that we're going to sort of utilize in terms of, how you lead, how you organize a company, how you try to move a company forward and grow a company, make sense of business plans that, given all of the idiosyncrasies of different businesses that we're involved with today. But over a period of time, my leadership style has really evolved because of two or three major influences from an educational standpoint and two or three major influences from a humanistic standpoint. My grandfather was a major influencer in my life. He was the one who told me to get out of an environment and go and find something else. And there was something that was visionary in the way that he approached in a very simple way. You don't want to do this, you must try and do that. And the encouragement, the style of the encouragement, the conversations, the deep conversations around that really, really influenced me a lot. Edward J. DeBartolo, he was the person in the end who really brought me to the United States to develop his soccer team. I was brought here to really put the team together. And after 6 months, he called me up to Youngstown and basically said, I want you to lead the entire organization. He saw something in me and what I was doing that I didn't even see in myself. And in the end, you need people like that in your life. You need people who are going to encourage you to stretch yourself and take you to different places where you didn't really think that you could go. And then there's Glenn Taylor, who, has been a major mentor of mine for years and years and years, who has given me more opportunity than I deserve. And I've always tried to do my level best for him. So I've taken pieces of, I think, my grandfather, Edward J. DeBartolo, and Glenn Taylor, long story short, into what I consider to be my leadership style. But the common denominator in all of those people was treat everybody equally. Give everybody opportunity. Let people grow. Let them make mistakes. Help them with those mistakes. Try to mold and develop people of good character. Put good people around you who are going to do great work for you. And I've always tried to do that. I challenge myself all the time in putting people who are better than I am in a lot of key positions around me so that they can not only challenge me, but also challenge the organization that I'm part of. And then sort of bringing it all together around sort of developing a why and a purpose and core values and a culture and strategic planning, etc. That's the business sort of blueprint framework that I try to establish wherever I go.
How is it that you can stay focused on your team, your organization, your garden, as it were, without getting yourself unduly distracted by how are you competing with other teams relative to your development and growth and leadership?
Well, I think, regardless of what business you're in, you are in competition with someone. There is somebody in your channel that is a competitor of yours, and you've got to figure out, what your value proposition is, to be able to sort of compete in really sort of any way that you're competing. You've got to figure out a way to be able to compete with your competition, obviously, and grow your own business. So I'm a huge believer in, I think that you've got to start with why. I always go back to, you must start with why. And for the readers that will listen to this podcast, I'm a huge believer in Simon Sinek, start with why. We've developed a why with Minnesota United that I think is completely different to every other sports franchise here in town. And I think that they would say that they have a why, they have a purpose. I think ours is completely different, and that develops or takes you into a narrative around what you consider to be your value proposition. And you must understand what your narrative is. And all of your staff must believe in that narrative. They must exhibit that narrative in both words and actions, and the way that they take your brand, your franchise to market. And then underpinning your why and your purpose and your narrative becomes your business's core values. Because if you don't have core values, and if you don't stick with them and stick to them and reinforce them, you're never going to hire the people who really can be a key stakeholder and take your brand to market to compete with whomever you're competing with. So that's where I start. I mean, there's a lot of things underneath all of that, but I really think that as a leader of a company and as you're working with your executive teams, etc., you must get your executive team to buy into a purpose. You must get them to buy into your core values. You must hire to those core values. You must train to those core values. It's not just about skill sets. Skill sets are very, very, very important. But when you're hiring, are you also hiring people that you really believe can be a great brand ambassador for you as seen through your why and your core values?
So how do you take big concepts like hiring to your values, running an organization, and presenting a brand that aligns with your values, and then you lay that over something that is seemingly less connected to these big things like sports, like entertainment? How would you connect those two?
Yeah, I think that the heavy lifting around all of that, Dee, is done on the front end by you know that I'm a traction person as well, and I move in and out of traction all of the time, and I try to adapt traction to our business, but certain parts of it maybe don't necessarily always work the way that Gino Wickman describes it in his book. In my opinion, he would have obviously a different opinion. But having said that, I think you've got to start with vision, and to get traction inside of your company, there are 4 buckets that he describes in the traction book that you've got to pay an awful lot of attention to. 2 buckets that I dive into all of the time is the people bucket. And it's very, very simple in the end: right people, right seats. So you've got to have people inside of your organization who truly do believe in what is the vision for the company to get traction for your company. Right people, right seats. And if you're not working inside of that piece of your organizational chart every single day, you've got no chance. I don't think, if you don't get it right on the inside, you've got no chance on the outside. I think it's a remarkable company that can get everything right on the outside while having dysfunction on the inside. And so you've got to get rid of dysfunction. I think that the issues bucket in Wickman's traction is also a very, very difficult bucket to go into, because people don't want to talk about the issues that you have inside of a company. They believe that when you're talking in terms of, hey, we've got to have open debate, we can't afford to take it personally. They don't want debate. They will take it personally. And as much as we say, hey, when we walk out of this room, we're all going to be on the same page and we're going to sort of drop our oars in the water and pull in the same direction, it doesn't necessarily happen that way. So it's a unique executive group, I think, that really can have that open debate around major issues that are inside of the company. But if you do have that culture, if you do have that ability as a company to be able to do that, I think you have a real chance of being very, very, very successful. And I think that there's all different levels of success that you can have. But if you really want to optimize an opportunity for your company, if you've laid all of this fabric into your company, I think that you, in the end, have a great opportunity to be very, very, very successful.
I want to take you back to a younger age, because I think your processes here and the conclusions you've come to are extraordinarily enlightened, and they had to come from somewhere, and they had to have been at least a moment in time or a season in time where you came to some decisions about how you were going to lead the rest of your life. Can you take me back to you're 35 years old, you're at the prime of your life. Where were you and what changed?
Yeah, it's great question. I think I've told you before that when I was 35 years of age, my wife was pregnant with our second child, and we were in Boston, Massachusetts on vacation, and the vacation was around my birthday. And we decided to go to Boston for whatever reason, and the birthday came, and we went out that morning, and something came over me that day whereby I just went back to the hotel room in the middle of the afternoon, and I didn't get off that bed for 24 hours, and I was looking at the ceiling fan twirling around above me, and I just kept saying to my wife, Walla, I just don't know what I've achieved. I don't know what I've done with 35 years. And, here's this young English guy now in Boston, Massachusetts, working for a soccer team in Pittsburgh. And I said, I don't know where my life is going. I don't know what this is really truly all about. And I got to figure it out. I mean, I've just got to figure it out. I've also told you a story that about Jim Dutcher at the University of Minnesota, and people like Jim Peterson from the Minnesota Timberwolves and Kevin McHale and Flip Saunders used to talk about Jim a lot because he was an incredible role model for them. And Jim Dutcher used to talk about QDLs all the time, quality days left. And at the ripe old age of 35, that's a different sort of analysis of you as a person and what you're doing with your life than today. Yesterday, when I was 70 years of age, 35 years later, after the Boston incident, the Boston Tea Party, as we call it inside of our home, our own Boston Tea Party.
I have to meet Walla.
Yeah. 35 years later, QDLs mean more to me today than they did maybe even 35 years ago. And I think I had a concept around quality days left. Wasn't necessarily calling it that at that point. But today, as a 70-year-old, I know that I've got a much smaller number of QDLs. So the question becomes, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to approach your life? How are you going to go out there every day while you've got your health, both physically and mentally, and you have the ability to be able to make an impact on people's lives in the business world, in the philanthropic world, in the nonprofit world, wherever it might be, wherever your heart, your passion takes you? What are you going to do with your QDLs? I think what I'm going to do over the next 10 years is going to be completely different to what I've done over the last 35.
I'm looking at you in askance, interested in giving us a few insights into what those things might be.
I mean, for today, I'm doing something that I'm very, very passionate about. The fact that Dr. McGuire and this ownership group have wanted to do what they have done in the Midway, here in this marketplace, without me having to uproot my family, and I've been offered the opportunity to lead that organization, is really remarkable and at so many different levels. At some stage of the game, I won't be the leader of that group. That's not imminent. But at some stage of the next 10 years, that will not be in place. I have been given so much in my life. When I think about the people who have impacted me, given me the opportunity, one of my favorite nonprofits is Big Brothers Big Sisters, because what they're doing is they're creating opportunity for people far less blessed than I have been in my life. I've had people who have stood up for me, who have given me things and put things in front of me that have just been truly remarkable from a learning, professional, financial, being able to take care of my family standpoint. There's a lot of people out there who just don't have that. And I don't know where it will be, but I really want to try as much as I possibly can to figure out the best way to give back. I've been given a lot of opportunity to do a lot of amazing things in my life. How can I impact one or two lives and just make changes in those people's lives? And I think that that's where ultimately my heart, my passion, my thought process, my desire would go.
So what do you say to a person who lives a small life, who hasn't had the visibility or, for that matter, this platform to talk about your QDLs or your priorities or how to make an impact on the world, to give back in some way? What would you say to a person who's living a very small life, a very quiet life, and frankly, a more private life?
Yeah, and I think we're all different, and I think we've all got different thought processes that lead to actions, that lead to a way that we approach all different aspects of our life. I would hope that, I think we live in a very divisive world, by the way. This isn't a political show at all, but I think as we journey down paths with leaders who are divisive, it really, really does irk me in so many different ways. Even if you're a very private person, if you're a very insular person, if you're a person who doesn't want to get out there, attitudinally, in your actions, it's amazing what you can do to impact somebody else in this world. Simple thank yous, simple courtesies, simple ways that you might think are just commonplace because you are a private person, actually still impact other people's lives. Wherever you interact with another human being, you are basically impacting that human being in some way, shape, or form. My challenge to people like that would be, every single time that you interact with a person, how are you interacting with that person? And are you impacting that person in some way, shape, or form through kindness, through your attitude, through however you approach that person? And I know that we're not all built that way. But at the same time, is there just something simple that you can do to make this place that we live in just a little bit of a better place?
I appreciate you sharing that. That's That's very impactful, Chris. I'm sitting here not wanting to talk, wanting to continue to listen to you. So thank you for that. I would like to explore, if we can, this whole idea about a divisive community that we live in. It's an observation that I've had, and I think it's shared by a lot of people. The sense of we focus on the polarizing positions rather than a convening attitude or approach to life or issues. When you think about what's ahead for us as a community, and it doesn't have to be Minnesota, but just as a people, and around this moving away from the divisive extremities on any content, whether it's a sports game or a social issue, what are some things you've thought about in terms of that approach? What needs to be different?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good one. I'll start professionally. I mean, and it goes back to our why as a club again. If I ask this question of people all the time, how many languages are spoken in the Twin Cities marketplace? And people say 10, 20, 30. There's 251. And, if you go to the University of Minnesota and you begin to look at the different segments of our community, this 251 languages, dialects spoken. I think it's 78 alone on Eat Street in Minneapolis. So when you think about it, these people came from all over the world. They decided to make sort of Minneapolis and Paul their home. I'll tell you a story in a second around a Liberian girls soccer team. There's 35,000 Liberians in our marketplace. Generally speaking, people are not aware of that. So, when we decided to sort of go to our why as a club, we understood that first, second, third generation people have come from all over the world who support their national teams, have a favorite soccer team somewhere else in the world. We just want MNUFC to be a place where all of those people can go and feel safe and be included and know that it's a diverse community that is supporting our team, and that when they come into that stadium and that arena, it's their stadium. This is their team. And that it doesn't matter whether or not you're a Liberian or you're a Hmong or you're a Somalian or you're from Poland or you're Peruvian or Venezuelan, and you see all of those countries' flags all over Allianz Field. We want everybody to know that we are their team. We want to pull that community together. So our why became, through the beautiful game, through soccer, the world's game, let's inspire and unite our community in the end of 251 languages. So that's the corporate jargon narrative. Then you've got to believe it, and you've got to believe it. And I'll go all the way to the other side of this. There's a whole group of churches that are in our marketplace that basically are trying to do the same thing, and it's called Merge, and it's led by this incredible leader, Dr. Sammy, who wants to try and accomplish what we're trying to accomplish as a soccer team, pulling people together. He wants to do it sort of with all of these nations and all of these different churches with different dialects and different languages. He wants to pull them all together. And so I find people all over the market who are really talking the same language as what I'm talking and we're talking, and they're doing it in their own channel. How do all of those people in the end come together to make our world, this diverse community in which we live, just simply a better place for every single human being that lives in our community? How can we do that? So my challenge to me personally is can I live that out every day? Can I do that every day? And do we have a diverse workforce? In Allianz Field, we have over 17 languages spoken from those 251, spoken by our part-time staff. We purposefully went into those areas of our community and recruited people from those areas to work inside of our stadium so that when those folks walk in to support our team, there's people speaking their languages inside of the stadium. So you've got to live it out, every single day. You've got to strap it on.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because when you mentioned this idea about uniquely uniting people around the world's game, the why for the team, what do people need to give up in order to embrace an idea of a united community, a united church, a united team? There is something we need to give up in order to embrace that. What do you think that is?
I don't know that people have to give up anything. I think that they've got to open up. And they've got to open up their eyes. They've got to open up their hearts. They've got to open up their souls. They've got to open up their thinking. So I'm not sure that any of us have to give up anything. I think that we've just got to think about it in a little bit of a different way.
Very powerful. Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to take us back to soccer and your youth and hear a few more stories about you in your soccer experience as a boy. You are humble and you don't spend a whole lot of time really celebrating all that you did achieve in soccer. And I'd like to have a little fun and go back into that and educate us on some of these English words too, right? So we talk about your English full badge and how you were honored and recognized. Can you take us back to your youth and talk about that?
Yeah, it's a different system over there to the one that exists in the United States, and actually that system has even changed now that I'm an older man, an older person. From when I was 10 years of age all the way up through coming over here when I was 28 years of age. My grandfather obviously encouraged me to play the game. I saw that I had a little bit of talent. I made it to something called the East Riding School Boys team, which was a representative team for the area that I was in. And that was when I was at high school. And the games that we played from that representative standpoint were always scouted by different scouts from different clubs. There was a scout there one day called John McSeveny, and he took two of us aside after a game. It was me and a guy called Stuart Pearson, and said, I want you to come down to Hull City and we want to take a look at you and sign schoolboy forms, etc.
Is Hull City a place, a school?
Yeah, Hull is a place. So if you look at the English map and you take a ruler from Liverpool on the west coast all the way through the east coast, you go right through Hull. Okay. So we're not quite as well known as Liverpool for a lot of different reasons, but we're a big fishing port, etc. And Filey was just about 50 miles north of their little seaside town. So Stuart and myself, got picked up, by Hull City. They're a professional soccer team.
How old are you at this point?
When I first went there, I was 15 years of age.
Is that typical for young boys
across
it really
the
country?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're scouting, for whatever is the next talent. And the story is that Stuart was the real talent. I was the wannabe talent.
That's okay. You'll go along with them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a huge Manchester United fan, and not for all of the reasons that people usually are. That's their favorite team. But Stuart became one of the first people bought by Manchester United from Hull City for a lot of money. He went on to have a great career with Manchester United, played for England, 58 caps for England. And so I followed his career. Meanwhile, I went to Hull City, and after about 3 years there, I got really badly injured. I ruptured a kidney. And that was really the end of my I tried to make a comeback, and I just couldn't. So I went to college, got a physical education degree, actually, which is almost like a teaching degree over there, and found that I really love coaching. I wanted to try and find a way to stay in the game. And so while I was going through college, I wanted to do all of my coaching qualifications, and you asked the question about full badge. Back in the day, the highest award that you could have as a coach in England was this full badge award. So it started with a preparatory badge, then a preliminary badge, and then a full badge. And so I went through that entire course, got my full badge when I was 22, and I was one of the youngest coaches in the country at the time to get my full badge award, which allowed me to coach professional players. And so that got me engaged in the game at the professional and semi-professional level. And that's where really I began to hone my skills as a coach, as somebody who knew the difference between a premier level player, a championship level player, all the way down to a Parks and Rec player, which happens in every sport. So that's really how it all started, B.
So when you're thinking about going from 15 to 35, really is taking off in the game. And then with the epiphany that you had in 35, it's really been a transition from that to the game of life altogether in terms of how you're applying that to your life overall. You still have to have a lot of fun. I'm thinking about this fall. I'm a Johnny Benny family. My son played soccer. He, too, was a goalie. and we have a suite at the Minnesota United Allianz Field for the game. So tell us what the Johnny Tommy game means to you all.
I think it's becoming to mean more and more and more, given all of the news that's coming out of St. Thomas these days.
I know.
It's fascinating. I mean, when we put the game together with them and negotiated to bring what is an iconic football game for so many years, this thing has grown and grown and grown. It's larger than life. And when you think of the incredible history at St. John's and the incredible history at St. Thomas, it really is truly amazing. And to think that it may be the last Johnny's Tommy's game that is played in the Twin Cities, in that St. John's has the game next year up in St. John's, is truly remarkable. The fact that game could be happening on October 19th in Allianz Field, and we had no idea when we put really this relationship together with the two colleges that would be the case. But it will be historic in so many different ways. The only tickets that are remaining are the student tickets. They haven't gone on sale yet. The game sold out, I think, in about an hour and a half. Obviously 2 years ago it was with Dave St. Peter and the Twins, and 34,000, whatever it was, showed up for that game. 20,000 people in Allianz Field for a Johnny's Tommy's game. Seeing the purple on one side and the red on the other will be absolutely, truly remarkable. It'll be an incredible event.
We can't wait to be there. And that won't be the only of the remarkable events that you've already brought to and are planning to bring to Allianz Field. I'd like to know a little bit about that, but let's pause for just a moment on Allianz altogether as a partner for you. I mean, this was an adventure for that organization to put their brand on this stadium and work with you, and then they've been strong partners in promoting these big events. Isn't that right?
Yeah, what an incredible company. And obviously headquartered, Allianz Life is headquartered on 394, a massive sort of corporate entity in the marketplace that gives back in so many different ways. And obviously they've got a very unique history in stadium naming rights, and particularly soccer teams, Bayern Munich, Juventus, Rapid Vienna, Nice, Sao Paulo. They have their name on all of those stadiums, but they're also in sports like rugby, and they have their name on Saracen Stadium in London. Saracens are arguably the biggest club team in rugby union in the world. So they know sports, and they know how to enter communities. And of all of the things that we are doing with them, and you're right, they are helping us promote many, many different activities, including sort of bringing drone racing, to Allianz Field.
New. We need to know more about that.
It's coming. And, there is a worldwide event that is going to take place in one of their stadiums in Europe this year. And we have a beta test this coming September in our own stadium. It'll be a made-for-TV event. It'll be sort of ESPN-driven. But if it goes very, very well and they figure out that we're a good location for it, we have a chance of bringing the World Drone Racing event that is in Nice, Europe this year to Allianz Field next year.
Marvelous.
I mean, it's incredible. And it's all through, those relationships. What I was going to say, though, B, was where they're an incredible partner is where they go above and beyond. And the way that we're entering the Midway and trying to do the right things for the Midway, it's an incredible urban redevelopment opportunity. I think that we can make an incredible impact in that community, and Allianz is in lockstep with us every single day. They want to do it right. They want to enter a community right. They want to be good citizens inside of that community. They understand the disruption of building a 20,000-seat stadium in the middle of an urban area where there is a lot of beautiful homes, a lot of people who their whole existence is around that stadium. And so we've just simply got to do it right, and we've got to be good neighbors to everybody. We've got to be very conscious of their lifestyles and things that are going on in their worlds and make sure that we address all of that. And Allianz is a key partner in all of that.
Well, and that's what I find so fascinating about soccer. It is bringing the next generation, a more diverse generation, into the field. You're saying you're safe, you're welcome here, this is yours, come in. That is uniquely soccer, and I think that will keep you uniquely relevant as we transition the next 10 years into, an increasingly diverse community. Don't you think that's true?
Oh, more and more and more and more. I'm so happy with the stance that we have taken, that we continue to take, and that we continue to reinforce with all of our staff and our new staff that come on board to make sure they understand who and what we are. But the challenge will be to make sure we maintain that and actually even take it to a completely different level. Because immediately that we start to build in that community, and we will build, there is 30 acres around the stadium that is going to be developed, and we're working in some way, shape, or form on that every single day. The importance of what we're establishing now is going to mean so much more to that community than actually the stadium does. Because now we're impacting people's lives directly. We're not just a sports team anymore.
Right.
This is where they live.
Yep.
This is where they go to work. This is where they play. And making sure that that comes together in a very cohesive way, to have partners like Allianz, to be very honest with you, Federated Insurance, Bell Bank, all of the, we call it, corporate social responsibilities. It's an overused word these days. But these companies, at their root, have this massive momentum inside of their companies around doing the right thing for the communities in which they are. And we're trying to find more and more partners that really sort of believe in that. So what is the backbone of your company? And from a corporate social responsibility standpoint, what are you doing? What are you trying to accomplish as a company that is greater than just selling whatever your product is?
Right.
And that's going to be the next iteration of who and what we are.
So what's on the calendar for this year? You have some big events coming up, not the least of which is our amazing Johnny Tommy game, but what else?
Yeah, so we have some wonderful things that are going on. People are starting to find the spaces, number one, inside of Allianz Field, and more bookings are beginning to happen in the Stadium Club, the Field Club, the Upper 90, and different companies, corporations, individuals are all finding those spaces. So that's all good. We've just hosted the Gold Cup, which meant that we hosted 4 different nations, 4 different countries' teams, and that's complex.
Your first year.
First year, and we're actually bidding for right now, and huge game this afternoon with our women's team playing against France. If they win that game, they play England in the semifinals of the World Cup. They're going to go on a 5-team tour, after they get back from France. I'd love to think, although it means they got to get by England, that they can win the whole thing. We're bidding to be one of the 5 cities in that 5-team tour to bring the women's national team to Allianz Field in its first year. Johnny's Tommy's, you've talked about, drone racing. Our team right now is on a tear. From an Open Cup standpoint, we've just beaten Houston and Kansas City. We're in the quarterfinals of the Open Cup. That game is, week on Wednesday. If we win that, we go to the semifinals of the Lamar Hunt Open Cup in the country in the first year in Allianz Field, which is huge. We need to win some MLS games to make sure we get to the playoffs. So, we have our hands full. We've pushed ourselves to what I would consider to be almost the limit for the number of events that we should be hosting in the first year. But we're also now planning 2020, and we have a big appetite for 2020 and some of the things that we think that we can do inside of our stadium in 2020.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. With that schedule and the fact that you're even here with us this morning, much appreciated, Chris. I'm going to ask you, when you think about your words to send us off on our way, as you look into this next season of life, what are some final thoughts you want to add to that?
I talked to you about earlier this morning. A very, very good friend who passed away, quite recently. And one of the things that he used to talk about all the time was, I'm going to go down in flames, I will not rust. And that struck me a while ago, just about life and QDLs and really how all of this sort of comes together. And, as you have your 70th birthday, you get very sort of thoughtful, very deliberate about, QDLs and what you want to do with your life, as you move forward. And I love the fact that, he used to say, hey, I'm going to go down in flames. I will not rust. And I would like to think that can be my mantra, maybe on a go forward basis. I don't want to rust out. I really do want to find something that's very, very meaningful. Don't know when that will be, in addition to, what I'm doing today, bringing the beautiful game, the world's game, soccer. And we are going to inspire and unite this community in the 250 languages. But I also want to figure out as well, what is next for Chris Wright after that is over, whenever that might be, and what an impact can we make on this incredible community in which we all live.
Well, I am not alone in telling you sincerely thank you for sharing your thoughts, your heart, your life, your story with us. Delighted to have had you here.
Thank you, B.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have yourselves a great day, and we'll see you next time on B's Table Talk.